I was adopted when I was a child, but in order for me to take on all the responsibilities of the house while my half-brother and sister enjoyed life, I was told that I deserved it. They reminded me that I was abandoned for a reason. I was unnecessary, useless. No one had wanted me then, and no one would want me now. They had taken me in, and for that, I owed them to, and no matter what I did, I would always deserve this. That moment, I realized. I had to leave. I had no memories of my parents. I only knew that one day, I was left behind. No explanations, no promises to return, just gone. The orphanage became my world, a place where every day felt the same. Meals at set times, strict rules, shared beds with other children who carried the same empty look in their eyes. When I was told that a family wanted to adopt me, I didn't know how to react. Adoption was rare, especially for older kids. Most of us knew we'd age out of the system, left to fend for ourselves. But suddenly, I had a chance. A real home. A mother and father. Siblings. The day I left, the orphanage staff told me to behave, to be grateful, to never forget that I had been given an opportunity. I nodded, determined to be everything they expected, and my new home was different from anything I had known. A real house, my own room, a family that smiled when they saw me. The first few weeks felt unreal. I had meals at the table instead of in a crowded hall, clothes that weren't handed down from a dozen kids before me, and parents who introduced me as their child. For the first time in my life, I felt wanted. But that feeling didn't last. At first, it was small things. My half-siblings were given new clothes while I wore whatever they outgrew. They had birthdays filled with gifts and celebrations, while mine was barely acknowledged. If I asked for anything, I was reminded that I should be thankful for what I already had. I told myself it didn't matter. I had a home, a family. I convinced myself that this was normal, that I was just adjusting. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized I wasn't their child. I was something else entirely. Let me know if you're ready for the next part. At first, I believed things would get better. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, I could truly be part of the family. But over time, I realized the truth. I was never meant to be their son. I was just someone they had taken in to do the things they didn't want to do. It wasn't obvious right away. The changes were gradual. At first, it was small differences. My half-siblings got new clothes, while I wore their hand-me-downs. They got gifts on birthdays and holidays, while I was told that I should appreciate having a home instead of expecting anything more. If they wanted something, they got it. If I wanted something, I was told I didn't need it. Then, responsibilities started falling on me. At first, I thought I was just helping out, but soon, it became clear I was expected to do the work while my half-brother and half-sister were free to enjoy their childhood, that I wasn't allowed to go out with friends because there were always things that needed to be done at home. If I wanted to rest, I was reminded that I should be grateful for what I had. If I ever complained, I was met with the same response. You should be thankful. We didn't have to take you in. Over time, I stopped asking. I stopped expecting anything different. I just did what was expected, because fighting it never made a difference. The differences between us weren't just about responsibilities. It was about how we were treated, how every mistake I made was proof that I was ungrateful, while my half-siblings were excused for everything. If my half-brother threw a tantrum, he was just having a bad day. If my half-sister broke something, it was an accident. But if I so much as spoke back, I was disrespectful. If I forgot to do something, I was lazy. If I asked for anything, I was selfish. They got to live without consequences. They could leave a mess behind, knowing I'd be the one cleaning it up. They could skip their homework, knowing no one would scold them. If I tried to point it out, I was the one being difficult. The moment I started pushing back, even just a little, the punishment came fast. I was called ungrateful. Ungrateful for the roof over my head. Ungrateful for the food they gave me. As if that was all it took to erase everything else. My half-brother and half-sister knew this too. They knew they could do whatever they wanted, and I'd be the one blamed. If something went missing, they said I took it. If they got in trouble, they made sure to drag me down with them. No one ever doubted their word over mine. And I started to realize that it didn't matter what I did. Whether I obeyed or not, whether I worked hard or not, I would always be seen as the outsider. The problem, the burden, and I was beginning to understand that nothing I did would ever change. That the older I got, the worse it became. The work never lessened, but my patience did. I stopped obeying every order without question. I started pushing back, not because I thought it would change anything, but because I was tired. Tired of being treated like a servant in a house where I was supposed to be a son. That's when they started calling me difficult. They said I had changed, that I had become ungrateful. If I refused to do something right away, I was met with anger. If I spoke up about how I was treated, I was told I was lucky to even be there. Meanwhile, my half-brother and half-sister could do no wrong. They wasted money, failed classes, got in trouble at school, but it was never a big deal. They were given second chances over and over again. Any mistake I made, no matter how small, was proof that I wasn't good enough. When they crashed the family car, my adoptive parents said it was just a learning experience. When I accidentally dropped a plate, I was careless. When they disrespected teachers, it was because school was hard. When I so much as raised my voice, I was disrespectful. The worst part was, I still tried. No matter how unfair it was, some part of me still hoped that if I just did everything right, maybe they'd finally see me as their son. That hope shattered the day I asked about my education. I had always known college wouldn't be easy for me. Unlike my half-siblings, I had no savings, no promises of financial help. But I had done well in school, hoping that at least some kind of support would be given. When I finally brought it up, I was given a straight answer. They had already done enough for me. I was told they wouldn't be paying for my tuition. That they had spent enough raising me, feeding me, giving me a home. That my half-brother and half-sister deserved to have their education paid for because they were their real children, while I had already taken more than I deserved. That was it. All those years of doing everything they wanted, of obeying, of trying to earn a place in the family, it all led to this moment. I wasn't one of them. I never had been. I never would be. Hearing those words, something inside me broke. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was done. And for the first time, I was ready to leave after they told me they wouldn't pay for my education. I stopped pretending. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped hoping for something that was never going to happen. The moment they made it clear that I was nothing more than a burden to them, something inside me shut off completely. I didn't lash out. I didn't argue. I simply went to my room and started thinking about my next step, but they weren't done with me. When I didn't immediately accept their decision and continue obeying them like before, they got angry. They called me ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. They reminded me, over and over again, that I was lucky to even be in their home. That if it weren't for them, I'd still be rotting in the orphanage. My half-brother and half-sister joined in, mocking me for even thinking I deserved help with college. They had always known they were more important, and now they were making sure I knew it too. I should have walked away. I should have ignored them. But then, my adoptive mother said something I could never forget. She said I deserved to be abandoned. That I was unwanted for a reason. That I should have been grateful anyone had taken me in at all. I had heard a lot of cruel things in my life, but this was different. It wasn't just unfair treatment or favoritism. It was pure, intentional cruelty. She wanted me to know that, no matter what I did, I would never be enough. Something in me snapped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of what they would say or do. I wasn't worried about being thrown out. I wasn't desperate for them to see me differently. I looked at them, the people who had claimed to be my family, and I knew I would never speak to them again. I didn't pack much. Just a bag with a few clothes, some documents, whatever little money I had saved from doing odd jobs. I didn't tell them where I was going. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door, and I didn't look back. Leaving that house was the easiest decision I ever made. I walked out with nothing but a small bag, and no one stopped me. No one called after me. No one tried to bring me back. And in the days, weeks, and months that followed, no one looked for me. I had no plan, no safety net, but I knew one thing, I would never go back. I worked wherever I could, saved every dollar, and built a life from nothing. It wasn't easy. There were nights I slept in places I don't want to remember, days I went without food. But even then, I was freer than I had ever been in that house. Years passed, and things changed. I found stable work. I got an education on my own, without their help. I met good people who treated me like I mattered. I built a life for myself, one that had nothing to do with them. Now, I can finally say my life is good. I have a home, a career, people who care about me. Everything they told me I didn't deserve, I made for myself. I hadn't thought about them in a long time. Until recently. A few days ago, after all these years, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but when I picked up, I recognized the voice immediately. It was them. And what they wanted from me after all this time left me speechless. I should have known better than to expect anything else from them. After all these years, after they had ignored me like I never existed, they weren't calling to ask how I was. They weren't calling because they regretted what they did. They were calling because they needed something. At first, they acted polite, almost as if we were just long-lost relatives catching up. They asked how I was, how life had been for me, but it was all empty conversation. I could hear the hesitation in their voices, the way they were carefully leading up to something. And then, finally, they got to the real reason for their call. My half-brother had made a mess of his life. He had racked up debt, lost money in bad investments, and now, he was in serious financial trouble. He needed help, and they had decided that I was the one who should provide it. They told me it was time to repay them. They listed everything they had done for me as if it was a financial transaction. The food they gave me, the roof over my head, the fact that they had adopted me at all, as if any of that had been out of love, as if I hadn't already paid for every meal and every night under their roof with years of labor, with my childhood, with my dignity. When I didn't respond immediately, they doubled down. They told me that, without them, I would have been nothing, that I owed them for not leaving me to rot in the orphanage. Then, they said something that made my stomach turn. They told me I should be grateful to my half-brother, because without him, they never would have adopted me in the first place. They said it so casually, like it was just a simple fact, like I should have realized it on my own. I was only ever brought into that house to serve a purpose, to lighten their son's burden, to make his life easier. And now, when he had made a disaster of his own life, they expected me to clean it up. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding IT. It didn't matter to them that they had thrown me away the moment I wasn't useful anymore. It didn't matter that they never looked for me, never cared where I went or if I even survived. In their minds, I was still the orphan they had saved. And now, it was time for me to pay them back. As I listened to their voices, something inside me went completely cold. I had spent years building my own life, creating something for myself out of nothing. Everything I had earned on my own. I had made something of myself without them. And now they thought they could just waltz back into my life and demand I fix their mistakes. I stayed silent for a long time, letting them say everything they wanted to say. I let them believe, for just a few moments longer, that I was still the weak, obedient child they used to control, but I wasn't that person anymore. And they were about to find that out. I let the silence stretch between us. I could hear them breathing on the other end of the line, waiting for my response. Maybe they expected hesitation. Maybe they thought I would fall back into old habits, desperate to please them, desperate to prove I was still worthy of their so-called kindness. But I wasn't that person anymore. I told them no. I told them I didn't owe them a single thing. I told them that every meal they fed me, every night I spent under their roof, I had already paid for 1,000 times over. That I had worked harder than anyone else in that house, that I had given them my entire childhood, and they still had the audacity to say I owed them. I told them they abandoned me first, that when I walked out of their house, they had already made their choice. They never called. They never looked for me. They didn't care if I lived or died. And now, after all these years, they thought they could just demand something from me. No, not now. Not ever. My adoptive mother started yelling, calling me selfish, calling me ungrateful. My adoptive father told me I was turning my back on family, that no matter what happened, blood was blood, but I wasn't their blood. And even if I had been, I wouldn't have cared. They had made it clear, time and time again, that I was nothing to them. Now, they were nothing to me. I hung up the phone. I blocked their numbers. I erased every last trace of them from my life, just like they had erased me from theirs all those years ago. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I built my life without them. I succeeded without them. I am happy without them. And I will never let them take a single thing from me again.